Hi, students, and welcome to today's lesson. I'm Mrs. Doble. Today, we will continue to explore the question, where do plants get the matter they need for growth? Are you ready? Grab your pencil and your science journal, and let's get started. Imagine it's time for lunch. You fill your bowl with a tasty salad with a variety of fruits and vegetables. But before you dig in, you take a moment to think about where all of this yummy goodness came from. We know that plants start as seeds and grow, but where do plants get the matter they need for growth? In our last lesson, we started an investigation to determine where plant matter comes from. We grew 4 onion plants, 1 with no water, 1 with no soil, and 1 with no air, as well as a control plant that received water, soil, and air. We will use this control plant to determine which variable or combination of variables affected plant growth. We used our measuring sticks to measure our plants to find out whether and how much each plant grew. This is day 0 for our onion plants. Each plant started out 10 centimeters tall. Let's take a look at the way each plant grew, starting with our control plant. Remember, this plant got water, soil, and air, so we expect this plant to grow normally. We will compare each of our other plants to this plant. Here's our control plant on day 0. Do you see any changes from day 0 to day 1? Maybe a little, but it's hard to tell. But day 5, wow, this plant has grown. It's poking out of the top of the bottle. Let's compare the control with the plant that got no water. Here it is on day 0. Any difference from day 0 to day 1? I don't see any growth. In fact, the plant might be starting to droop. How about day 5? Maybe a tiny bit of growth, but not as much as the control, and it's still looking a little sad and droopy. Time for the plant with no soil. What do you notice about the growth between the first 2 days? I see a bit of a change, do you? And wow, by day 5, this plant has reached the top of the bottle as well. It looks very similar to the control plant, doesn't it? Okay, last plant. This plant has no air. No difference in height that I can see between day 0 and day 1. And I don't see a difference between day 1 and day 5 either. Although, is this plant looking a little bit brown to you? Let's compare all 4 of our plants on their last day of growth. What do you observe? I notice that the plant with no soil and the control plant grew to similar heights, while the plant with no water and the plant with no air didn't grow very much at all. But we need to back up our observations with data, so let's look at the numbers. Here's a table of the data we collected. On day 0, each plant was 10 centimeters tall. By day 5, the plant with no water and the plant with no air were 11 centimeters tall, a difference of only 1 centimeter. But the plant with no soil was 15 centimeters tall, a difference of 5 centimeters. And the control plant was 16 centimeters tall. According to this data and your observations, where do plants get the matter they need for growth? One of your tasks at the end of this lesson will be to make a claim about where plants get matter for growth. Well, it looks like the plant with no soil grew just fine. It's almost as tall as the control. But the plant with no air and no water did not do so well, did they? It appears that plants need air and water, or they can't grow well, which makes me think that plant matter comes from water and air. So here's a question. When plants grow, are they forming a new substance? Let's think about this. Plants start as tiny seeds. Then they use water and air to create roots, stems, and leaves. Do you think you could take a sequoia tree and turn it back into water and air? I don't think so. And remember, one of our indicators of a substance change is the formation of a solid. Water is a liquid, and air is a gas. But plant matter is definitely a solid. I think plant matter is a new substance. So plants use water and air, but not soil, to create a new substance called plant tissue. Plant tissue is the living component of a plant that makes up its structures. Leaves, stems, and roots are all made of plant tissue. If it wasn't amazing enough that plants can take water and air and turn them into plant tissue, let's look at an example of just how much plant tissue they can form. Look at this tree. There is a car driving through the tunnel in the tree. Can you imagine how immense this tree is? But this is just a drawing, right? Surely a real tree could not be this big. Guess again. Here's a photograph of the same tree. This is the Wawana tunnel tree. By the time this tree fell in 1969, it was approximately 2,100 years old. And where did this enormous tree's matter come from? That's right, it came from air and water. Can you believe a tree could grow to be so gigantic using only air and water as sources of matter? But I still have questions, do you? I know plants change water and air into plant tissue, but I want to know, how do they do it? And I know plants suck water up through their roots, but I wonder, how do they take in air? These are excellent questions. We will continue to learn about how plants grow by using matter from air and water in our next lesson, as we begin to investigate the question, do plants breathe? First, record your observations and data from the investigation. Next, respond to the questions about your claim. Finally, summarize what you learned about plant matter in this lesson.